Hey everyone, ever get that feeling, like you're on a roll, totally winning, like everything's going your way and you just want to keep pushing, keep going further. Maybe you've heard that saying, quit while you're ahead. Well, today we're taking that idea to a whole new level, strategically speaking, of course. We're diving into Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power and getting deep into Law 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for in victory. Learn when to stop.
This law, it really flicks the script on how we think about success, and power. It's not always about pushing, pushing, pushing forward. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most powerful move is knowing when to just hit pause.
Whoa, okay, so are we talking about becoming masters of like restraint,
Hmm.
holding back even when you feel like you could, I don't know, conquer the world?
That's the core of it. Green, he calls it success intoxication. And, it makes sense. When you're winning, it's easy to get swept up in that feeling like you're invincible. You start thinking, I can't fail, I can't lose, and that's when you become most vulnerable. That's when you overreach. And that's when you make those big mistakes.
Hold on, so you're saying that not knowing when to stop, like failing to recognize that point, that could be the very thing that leads to downfall. That's kind of a counterintuitive idea.
It is, it is. But think about it. History's packed with cautionary tales, stories that prove this point. And Green, he uses a super striking example, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Napoleon, I mean, come on, this guy was a military genius. He conquered most of Europe, but he didn't stop there, right?
No, he didn't. Instead of consolidating this massive empire he built, he was driven by this need for more. He had to have more. So he decides to invade Russia in 1812.
Oh, the infamous Russian winter.
hmm
I can already see where this is going.
And he ignored all the warnings, every single one, about the brutal winters and the just logistical nightmares waiting for them. The consequences, devastating, catastrophic losses. Napoleon's army, completely unprepared. And ultimately, it was a turning point. It led to the destruction of his own empire.
It's like the Napoleon complex is more than just a funny saying, right? It's his real-life example of ambition, just gone unchecked. Okay, so how does Green tie this to restraint? Is he saying that being cautious, is that the key to maintaining power?
Yeah, but it's not just about being timid or passive. Green's argument is that restraint, it's an active skill. It's strategic. It's about recognizing that sometimes the smartest move is to, step back, consolidate what you've gained, fortify your position, and resist that temptation to overextend yourself.
You know what? I'm starting to see how this applies way beyond just like military stuff. I mean, think about companies that grow super fast and then suddenly they implode. Athletes who play past their prime and, well, they end up tarnishing their legacy.
Mm.
Even relationships, right? Where one person, they just got to control everything and they end up pushing everyone away.
Perfect examples. You're totally getting it. Pushing past your limit, even when you're on that winning streak, it can backfire. And I mean spectacularly. Restraint, in this sense, is about knowing when to hold back, knowing when to conserve your resources. And sometimes it's just about enjoying what you've already accomplished.
Okay, so it's about choosing your battles strategically,
Right.
not just sitting on the sidelines,
Yeah.
but assessing, thinking it through, making calculated decisions, when to go all in, when to hold back. But how do we know when we've hit that sweet spot? I mean, isn't there a danger in being too cautious? Like maybe missing out on opportunities?
And that's where things get really interesting. The challenge is finding that balance, between reaching too far and not reaching far enough. And that's what we're going to explore next.
It's funny. I was thinking about this earlier. It's like we always view success as this straight line up, up, up. But what if real power is knowing that things move in cycles?
Okay. What do you mean cyclical?
Well, just look at nature.
Right.
Everything works in cycles, the seasons, the tides, day and night. There's a time to grow, a time to harvest, a time to rest. And I think our goals are the same. There are times to push hard, but there are also times when it's smarter to just step back, regroup, let things settle.
That's interesting. So we try to fight nature by always pushing for more growth. Maybe we should just go with the flow, the natural ebb and flow.
Exactly. And that's where this law of restraint comes in.
Yeah.
It's about seeing those natural cycles and working with them, not fighting them.
So restraint is about finding that rhythm, expanding and then contracting.
Hmm.
That's got to be way more balanced than that always on the grind stuff we always hear. Yes, it's about knowing that pulling back doesn't mean giving up. It's just strategic, regroup, recharge so you can come back stronger.
Okay, I can see how that fits into this whole power dynamic thing.
Yeah.
But let's get real for a sec.
Yeah.
What are some signs that we might be pushing too far? Like we've hit that point where restraint is the smarter move.
Such a good question. It's all about paying attention to those little cues, both inside yourself and around you. One of the biggest internal signs, that feeling of anxiety,
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling, that knot in your stomach. You're always on edge, like your body's screaming at you to slow down.
Yes, and you got to listen to those signals. They're often telling you you're pushing past your limits.
Wait, so we shouldn't just try to ignore those feelings. They're actually telling us something's got to change.
Right on. It's your body saying, hey, we need to reassess, make some changes, pull back from whatever's draining us.
Okay, anxiety's a red flag. What else should we watch out for?
Another sign from inside is when your work starts slipping or you're not making good decisions. When you're stretched too thin and stressed, it's hard to focus. Think clearly and make smart choices.
Makes sense. It's like your brain is overloaded.
Totally. And that's when mistakes happen. You miss details and things start to fall apart.
So it's not just how much you're doing, but how well you're doing it. If your standards are dropping, that's a sign to pull back and rethink things.
Right. Then there are those external cues signals from the people around you.
What kind of signals?
Well, one of the clearest signs is when people start resisting or pushing back. Could be anyone. Colleagues, clients, partners, friends, family, anyone you're dealing with regularly.
So maybe people start questioning your decisions more.
Yeah.
Or they don't seem interested in your ideas anymore.
Exactly. Or they might start setting boundaries, pushing back against your demands or withdrawing their support.
It's like they're holding up a mirror showing you how your behavior is affecting them.
Yeah, those external cues are super valuable. They help you understand if you're overreaching. They're telling you, hey, maybe you need to change your approach, work together more, or just tone it down a bit.
So we got internal cues like anxiety and bad work, and external cues like people pushing back. Any other red flags?
Oh, yeah. One more big one is that feeling of diminishing returns. You're working harder and harder, but getting less and less back.
Ugh, I know that feeling all too well. Like running on a treadmill, you're exhausted, but going nowhere.
Exactly. That often means you've hit a wall, you've reached your limit in that area. You got to change something. It might be time to try something new, or maybe just enjoy what you've achieved for a bit.
Okay, this is all making a lot of sense. But let's say we are seeing some of these warning signs. What do we actually do about it? How do we use this law of restraint in real life?
That's the million-dollar question. There's no one answer that fits everyone. But there are some practical steps you can take. The first and most important step, just admit it's happening. Don't deny it, ignore it, or try to muscle through it.
So we got to be honest with ourselves. No more pretending things are okay when they're not.
Yep. You got to step back, take a good look at what's working and what's not. Ask yourself, where am I overextended? What am I ignoring? What needs to change?
Okay, so honesty and self-awareness are key. What's next?
Next, you got to look at your goals and priorities again. Do they still make sense? Have things changed that mean you need to adjust course?
So it's like checking in with your original plan and making sure you're still on track.
Yeah, and it's also about realizing that goals and priorities can change. What was important a year ago might not be so important now. The key is to be flexible and adapt. Change course when you need to.
That's so important. It's easy to get caught up in the race and forget to stop and ask yourself, am I even still passionate about this?
For sure. That's why this reevaluation is so crucial. It makes sure you're not just chasing some external sign of success, but you're on a path that feels right and fulfilling.
Okay, so we've admitted there's a problem and we've looked at our goals again. What's the next step in using this law of restraint?
Now it's time to find specific places where you can pull back, focus your energy, or just create some space to breathe.
So like delegating tasks, setting boundaries, or just saying no to new commitments?
You got it. It's about prioritizing your energy and focusing on what really matters.
This makes me think about how much we worship that hustle mentality.
Yeah.
It's like we're scared to slow down or say no because we don't want to seem weak or lazy.
I hear you. But I think real strength is knowing your limits, recognizing when you need to recharge, and having the guts to put your well-being first, even when it goes against what everyone else is saying.
Okay, I like that. So it's not selfish to take care of yourself. It's actually crucial for long-term success.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to do everything yourself. Sometimes the smartest move is to ask for help, delegate stuff to people who are better at it, or just admit you need a break.
So it's not weak to say, I need help or I need a break.
Not at all. It means you're self-aware and strong. It shows you know what you need, and you're willing to take care of yourself so you can be your best in all areas of your life.
This is changing how I think about success. But before we move on, is there anything else about this strategic stopping thing you want to highlight?
Yes. Don't forget to communicate throughout this process.
You mean telling others what you're doing.
Yeah. If you're making changes that will affect people around you, like colleagues, clients, partners, or family, you got to be upfront about your decisions. Explain why you're doing it and acknowledge any inconvenience or disappointment it might cause.
Right. It's about respecting those relationships and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about setting clear expectations for the future so everyone knows what's coming.
Okay. Communication is key. Anything else?
Patience. Be patient with yourself and give yourself time to adjust. You can't expect to change everything overnight. It's a process. It takes time and effort.
So it's progress, not perfection.
You got it. It's about making small changes over time and celebrating those wins along the way.
This is such good advice.
Yeah.
I think it applies to way more than just this law of restraint. It's a reminder to be kind to ourselves, enjoy the journey, and realize that change takes time.
Totally agree. And you know what really strikes me about this law? It's not just about getting success, it's about keeping it. It's about building something that can handle the tough times and setbacks that come with any worthwhile goal.
So it's about a more resilient and sustainable way to succeed, one that doesn't lead to burnout or disappointment later on.
You nailed it. It's about realizing that true power isn't about constantly pushing. It's about knowing when to pause, reflect, regroup, and recharge. It's about finding a rhythm of expanding and contracting that lets you thrive over time.
I love that. It's like the ebb and flow of the tides, those natural cycles of growth and renewal.
Exactly. And when you align yourself with those natural rhythms, you tap into a deeper source of power and wisdom.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. It's like we're weaving together ancient wisdom, natural principles, and practical strategies.
Me too. And you know, something that gets lost in our modern chase for success, the importance of inner peace and contentment.
I think you're right. We're so focused on achieving, striving, getting more, that we forget to just be and appreciate what we already have.
Right. And that's where this law of restraint can be so powerful. It's not just about outer achievements, it's about finding balance and fulfillment inside. By letting go of that need to always prove ourselves, we make room for more joy, gratitude, and presence in our lives.
So restraint isn't just a strategy for success, it's a path to inner peace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about realizing that real power doesn't come from controlling others or having a ton of stuff. It comes from mastering yourself, your emotions, and your desires.
This has been eye-opening. I'm feeling inspired to slow down, rethink my priorities, and make more time for those things that help me recharge.
That's fantastic. It's all about finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
that balance between ambition and restraint that lets you succeed without sacrificing your well-being or your integrity.
Okay, one last question before we wrap up this part. We've talked about the good stuff about strategic stopping, but are there any downsides or risks? Is there ever a time when pulling back might actually hurt you?
Great question. It's important to remember that there are always nuances and things to consider. While strategic stopping can be super powerful, there are times when pulling back too soon or too suddenly might not be the best move.
Okay, give me an example when that might be the case.
Let's say you're in a super competitive field where staying ahead is everything. If you pull back too soon, you might give your competitors a chance to catch up and pass you.
So it's about balancing momentum with knowing when to solidify your position.
Exactly. And it also depends on what you're doing. In some fields like art or starting a business, taking a step back can be a good way to rethink things, refine your vision, and come back stronger. But in other fields like pro sports or politics, being present and always pushing might be key to staying on top.
That's really helpful. It sounds like you got to be smart and understand how things work in your specific situation.
Exactly. There's no one right way to do this. The key is to develop wisdom and intuition so you can make the best call for your situation.
This has been so insightful. I'm already thinking about how to use this strategic stopping in my life.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. You'll make mistakes sometimes, get caught up in the moment, or just mess up. But that's how you learn. The key is to learn from those experiences, adjust your path, and keep moving forward with more wisdom and self-awareness.
Thanks for sharing your insights today. It's clear that knowing when to stop seeing that peak of success and stepping back before you go too far is a super valuable skill, not just for personal success, but for life in general.
Couldn't agree more. And you know what? This makes me think we could even apply this on a bigger scale. What if we use this strategic stopping idea not just for ourselves, but for our ambitions as a whole society? What would it look like to apply the law of restraint to how we always chase growth and progress?
Wow, that's deep. What does it even mean for society to know when to stop? Where are the limits of our ambitions? How do we create a better future for everyone? Those are some big questions that need their own deep dive.
Totally agree. Those are the questions we need to figure out as we face the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I think we've all learned something new about the power of restraint and the importance of knowing when to step back so we can move forward with more wisdom and purpose.
Thanks for guiding us through this fascinating exploration.
And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, remember, true power isn't about always pushing forward. It's about knowing when to pause, to reflect, to regroup, and to make space for something even better to come along. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already about knowing when to stop, but I'm curious, how does this all fit back into this big picture of power? Like Robert Greene talks about in his book, The 48 Laws of Power.
That's where things get really juicy. You see, Green's book, it's all about these unspoken rules, the ones that really drive how people act, especially when it comes to power and influence. And this Law 47, it tells us something huge. Power isn't just about winning all the time or dominating everyone.
So it's not about being the loudest or most aggressive person in the room.
Nope. It's about mastering yourself, your emotions, how you react. And that often means having the discipline to hold back,
Right.
Resist that urge to grab everything or chase after every shiny new thing.
So you're saying sometimes choosing not to act, that's actually more powerful than constantly pushing and striving.
Exactly. It's like recognizing that, hey, stepping back, observing, consolidating what you've got, that creates the perfect opportunity, to strike when the time is right. It's a long game, not just reacting in the moment.
I like that. It's like in martial arts, sometimes deflecting your opponent's energy is better than meeting force with force.
Perfect analogy. It's about using their momentum against them, finding that sweet spot where you can have the most impact with the least effort. It's subtle, but when you get it right, it's super effective.
So restraint isn't about being passive or weak. It's about being smart and strategic with your actions, right? It's about using power with finesse, not brute force.
Mm.
Okay, but why should our listeners care about all of this? How does understanding this law of restraint actually help them in their own lives?
Well, one of the biggest benefits is that it helps you avoid those unnecessary risks and setbacks, By recognizing when you've won something big and knowing when to consolidate your gains, you're way less likely to make a rash decision that could mess everything up.
So it's about protecting what you've earned and not letting greed or your ego take over and lead you down a dangerous path.
Mm.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of wanting more even when they've already accomplished something amazing.
For sure. It's understanding that sometimes the best move is to just walk away, even if you feel like you're on a hot streak.
Right, that makes sense.
Hmm.
What are some other ways this law of restraint can help people?
Another big one is that it can help you build a more sustainable path to success, something that you could actually keep up and enjoy. By focusing on quality over quantity, going deep instead of wide, and having that long-term vision instead of chasing quick wins, you're much more likely to create a life that is both successful and meaningful.
So it's not just about hitting those external goals. It's about creating a life that truly aligns with your values and what you're meant to do.
Exactly. It's about defining success on your own terms and building a life that feels both fulfilling and something you can actually maintain.
I love that. It's about shifting from needing external validation to finding satisfaction from within. And I think that leads to a much more genuine and lasting sense of accomplishment. But I have to ask, is there ever a time when pulling back might actually be a bad thing?
You bring up a good point. There are definitely times when stepping back too soon or too abruptly could be a mistake. Like, imagine you're in this super competitive field where staying ahead is everything. If you ease up too early, you might give your rivals the chance to catch up and overtake you.
So you have to find that balance between keeping the momentum going
Mm-hmm.
and knowing when to secure what you've already gained.
Exactly. And it also depends on what field you're in. In some areas like art or entrepreneurship, a strategic retreat might be brilliant. It gives you time to rethink things, refine your vision, and come back even stronger. But in other areas like professional sports or politics, you have to stay visible and keep pushing to stay on top.
It sounds like the key is to be aware of how things work in your specific situation and using your best judgment to make the smartest choice.
Absolutely. You got it. There's no magic formula here. The real skill is developing the wisdom and intuition to know when to push and when to hold back. It's like mastering the art of perfect timing.
This has been so eye-opening. I'm already thinking about how I can step back, reassess my goals, and approach things with more awareness and intention.
That's fantastic. And always remember, this is a journey, not a destination. You'll stumble, sometimes get swept up in the excitement, or just make a plain mistake. But those are all learning experiences. The key is to learn from them, adjust your course, and keep going with more wisdom and self-awareness.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's clear that this whole idea of knowing when to stop, recognizing that peak of success and stepping back before you go too far, that's a valuable skill, not just for reaching your goals, but for navigating life in general.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what this makes me think? Maybe we could apply this principle on a much bigger scale.
Mm.
What if instead of just our individual goals, we thought about it for society as a whole? What if we applied the law of restraint to our constant pursuit of growth and progress?
That's a profound thought. What does it even mean for an entire society to know when to stop? What are the limits of our collective ambitions? How do we build a sustainable future that works for everyone? These are huge questions. I think they deserve a deep dive all on their own.
Definitely. These are the questions we need to wrestle with as we face the challenges and opportunities of this century.
This has been a truly enlightening conversation. I think we've all gained a new understanding of the power of restraint and how important it is to know when to step back so we can move forward with greater wisdom and purpose.
Thanks for leading us through this fascinating exploration.
And thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, remember, true power isn't about always pushing ahead. It's about knowing when to pause, to reflect, to regroup, and to make room for something even more amazing to unfold.